All right, I am super excited because today in the mail, I just received my brand new show album. This features some of my favorite portrait and commercial work, and I thought this would be a great time to make a video on some of the thought process I had in building this album and maybe what you guys can do if you're looking at having an album that you mail off to potential clients, or if you're meeting with people locally and want to show your best work. Let's jump right into it. Now this video is sponsored by Saal-Digital. They wanted to pair up with me and make another video on albums, and I thought, well, I'm actually in the need of a brand new show album, and so why don't we do something more on the commercial side of things? If you're a wedding photographer, you've probably already built wedding show albums and you take those to your meetings with your clients. This could be used for that as well, but instead I want to kind of focus on more the commercial side of photography because that's really what this book is aimed towards. If you want to get your own album, you can go to the link in the description below or in the top pinned comment, and there is a deal with Saal-Digital if you want to produce a book like this. So let's go ahead and jump right into this. This is Saal's professional line series of books. And as you can see here, I've also ordered their black leatherette gift box. And kind of the idea with this is you want to produce something that's really impactful and gives that wow factor so that when you mail a show album off to somebody or you go in for an in-office meeting, what you pull out is impressive and it looks professional and it stands out from maybe the other people that you're competing with or the other photographers that that agency might be working with. Now, if you only have a really basic understanding of the commercial side of photography, I highly would recommend checking out the tutorial we produced with Monty Isom called Making Real Money, the Business of Commercial Photography. And in that tutorial, it really focuses on nothing about taking photographs, but instead it focuses on the business of photography, how to line up jobs, how to make invoices, how to do treatments, how to make proposals, how to license your work. And another big part of that tutorial is how to get your work in front of advertising agencies, art buyers, art directors, or if you're trying to go directly to the brand, how do you market your work? It's an incredible resource, and building a show album like this is just a very small part of that tutorial, but as you'll see today, this is an incredible marketing tool that every photographer really needs to know how to perfect and utilize so that you can get work on your own. So the album that I have here, like I said, is the professional line. This is the extra large version, so it's 12 inches by 16 inches, and it comes with this little ribbon here. I can pop the book out like this, and as you can see, this thing is pretty substantial. I think I maxed out the pages. I don't know if there are 42 or 46 pages here, but I wanted to make a really substantial book that featured some of my favorite work that I've done really on the F-Stoppers channel. And then as I go through these images, you'll see there are a few of my commercial work that I've been paid to do, but for the most part, this is kind of personal projects that I've done here on the channel. Now for this particular album, I used their wood slate backing, which looks really awesome. I love the way that this looks. And then of course I've used the glossy front cover, and I featured one of my more favorite images here. And then it comes with this plastic protective piece to kind of protect the acrylic. So of course we will peel that off here at the end. But before we get into all of my images and show you kind of the layouts that I've done, I want to outline the three most important elements of designing a good book. Now the first thing that you want to do is you want to make your book consistent in the type of work that you're showing. You want a uniformity between the images, the layout, and the overall design. And so you don't want to have every page look different, and you definitely don't want a lot of different genres of images. So if you're a well-rounded photographer and you shoot a bunch of different stuff and you're just trying to take any job that you can get, you're not going to want to make a show album that features everything that you do. So if you shoot family portraits and maybe you do some weddings, maybe you even do like dog photography or pet photography, you don't want to put all that stuff into, say, an album like this that's catering towards editorial or commercial or portrait photography, because they're going to see your wedding images and it's going to devalue your work. So if you specialize in a certain genre of photography, you're going to want to only use those images. And if you do a bunch of other stuff, I would recommend making a couple show albums only for those specific genres, so that when you mail something out or you go into an office to meet with a potential art buyer, the work that you're showing them lines up perfectly with the type of work that they're going to hire you to do. The second important thing that you really need to consider before designing and printing an album like this is you want to curate your work and be incredibly selective. So that means if you have a shoot with 5 awesome images, maybe you're only gonna pick 1 or 2 of those images from that shoot. If you've worked with a model many times, like you might only want to feature that model once. If you have a bunch of older images that you have some kind of personal connection with, maybe you scrap most of those and only pick out the one showstopper and really narrow down your portfolio so that it's as strong as possible. Now, if you have a portfolio that's on your website, or if your portfolio also lives on Instagram, chances are you're gonna have hundreds of images on those platforms, and it's gonna be not quite curated as tightly as a show album. So I would recommend just really spending a lot of time making sure the images that you're going to print are perfect, they're flawless, they're retouched great, and they're your absolute bangers, so that your show album leaves your client with the biggest impression possible. And the third and probably the most important thing when designing an album like this is giving your viewer an emotional experience. If you've been a wedding photographer, you know that this is the most important thing with your presentation. If you can get a bride to stop and cry or get emotional or feel like that they know the people in your images, you're almost guaranteed to book that client. And the same thing is true with commercial work. If you have images that stand out and evoke a certain feeling, and let the art buyer feel like, oh, these images represent you, and I have this emotional bond with the work and with you, they're gonna build an emotional response with themselves, and they're gonna feel like, hey, we know this guy, we love his work, it made me feel a certain way. And it's kind of this untouchable thing that you want to add on top of all of your images, and that untouchable, that unquantifiable element is what is probably the most important thing with photography. So inevitably you're gonna have images like you've shot a certain celebrity, or you've done a photo shoot that was crazy and it had the biggest production ever, or you overcame some hurdles during a photo shoot because everything was going wrong and somehow you pulled the shoot off. And when you go back and you look at those images, you're gonna say, it's this B or C list celebrity, I gotta put them in my book, or I can't believe that we made that photo shoot happen during a hurricane, I gotta put that image in my book. But in many cases, your clients are never gonna know those backstories, and those images never have the same impact to them like they do to you. So sometimes it's really hard as a photographer to break away from the experience that you had while making an image and try to look at it objectively for the first time as somebody might be doing when they look at your work for the first time. So when I build an album like this, I usually show it to a bunch of friends who aren't photographers and see if there's any image that stands out and they say, that's a weird photo, or that person doesn't look like they fit the scene, or why is the retouching so heavy-handed? And so I like to get other people's opinions so that I can kind of get the overall vibe of what other people might look at in my own work, so that I'm not overlooking something and publishing something that I have a personal connection with. All right, so let's go ahead and open this thing up and start looking at this. I start off right off the bat with some portrait work. These are all kind of like moody portraits that I've actually taken in Puerto Rico. And for a lot of this, as you'll see, I love doing these full bleed spreads where the image is just huge and impactful. And so a lot of what makes a good show album successful is the presentation. So you're gonna get the badass album, you're gonna have the glossy cover, you're gonna have the book that you can keep the album in. All of that goes to a good presentation. And if you listen to somebody like Monty Isom, he even takes it a step further. Maybe he would pack his album with some gift cards to like his favorite barbecue restaurant in town that the client lives in, so that when they get it, they say, oh, wow, like there's something for me too. It's not just an album of this photographer, but maybe there is tickets to Six Flags, or there's a gift card to go get something at a really awesome restaurant. Something that just makes the work stand out and makes people remember you. That's gonna be really, really important. So as you open your album, if you have something like this where the first few images are just really impactful, you're definitely gonna wanna start off with strong images, and then if you can, keep that level all the way through. But if not, the general rule is to start off with awesome images at the beginning, and then also end your album and presentation with really banger images as well. Now, as I open this and I kind of start on the first page and look at the cover, many photographers might wanna put their name on it. I think that's a really good idea, just so that if the book gets lost and if somebody just looked at this and they didn't know that this was my work, they would forget which photographer was associated with that. So if you want to put your name on the front cover or maybe on the inside, maybe you even want to put a contact, an email or a phone number, those are all pretty good ideas too. One thing I would recommend not doing with an album like this is putting a date on it, because inevitably, you know, if this album has a shelf life of a year or two, maybe 3 years, it'd kind of suck to put, you know, 2023 on it, and then, you know, in 24, the album's gonna feel more dated than it actually is. Also keep in mind, if you do put a phone number on it and you're relocating to a different market, or if you somehow change your number pretty often, that could be a huge hiccup. So definitely anything that you print in the book to kind of associate it back to you, make sure it's gonna be something that lasts a long time. Now, this next little series is one of the spreads that I did where I feature one person throughout 3 images. And normally I would recommend not having the same model or subject in your book over and over and over again. But in this case, this kind of tells a story. You know, this is my buddy Keith, who's an amazing guitar player. He's also an incredible photographer and videographer. He does a lot of really artistic stuff. And for this shoot that I did at one point on our channel, he was kind of showing off his record collection, and then he's also, you know, showing off his guitar, and, you know, I got to take a headshot. So I felt like these 3 images kind of showcase, maybe if I was hired to go do an editorial shoot, that I could go out and capture multiple images of the same person and tell a complete story. So, you know, if you have a layout like this where it's clearly in 3 different locations, it just makes the shoot and the production feel bigger, because people can really associate, you know, all of your skill set. You can do a great, interesting portrait that's a little bit different. You can take an environmental portrait, and then, you know, this image just has a lot of character. I just love the way that that one looks. So with this page, again, we have another similar layout where it's the same model, but it's 3 completely different looking images. And this was a personal shoot that I did, and I was trying to build up more of my athletic sports photography. I really enjoy dramatic lighting, and I enjoy athletes. And, you know, putting those together is one of the things I really enjoy photographing. And so I thought, you know, swimming isn't really a genre that's represented much in my work. And so we did this styled shoot with this model and just got completely different looks. This one over here is with the high key background. I think that looks really clean and editorial. And then the one in the middle, I've added some different effects and some gelled lights to kind of give a stylized shot. And then the one on the left is just, you know, another vertical image to kind of fill this out. One thing that I've noticed in looking in our library at some of these really fine art books is that many of the top level photographers, the top tiered photographers, they will just put 1 image per page, and they'll actually leave the whole page around it either black or white. So in this example, maybe if I felt like the image on the left might be the weaker of the 3, I would center this image in the middle and make it all just white, probably white for this one. And then that way, you know, you don't have 3 images kind of competing for the viewer's attention. That's up to you to decide, but in this case, I felt like this spread worked really well. From here, we're kind of moving with the theme, so that's another idea that you're gonna have. If this whole book is kind of portraiture for me, I want it to flow and not kind of jump too far ahead of itself. So if we start off with the editorial page and then we kind of start moving into sports, I want to keep the book flowing with more sports images. So here is another example of just the same model, same location, same kind of lighting setup, but showcasing just 2 drastically different images, and then they're full spread, so I feel like they have the most impact, and it kind of showcases the basketball theme here. As we move to the next one, here we are moving into kind of like, maybe like tennis. We have 2 tennis images, and then we also have a track and field image here. So I'm trying to just round out this athletic portraiture. Part of this spread is really modern, like this image over here, which is the cover image, and I've done the light painting, and, you know, I've just gelled the image with some really dramatic color. And then these images are more standard portraits that you might see on the sales floor of, say, like the Nike or Adidas outlet. You know, something like this would work really well for those brands. And then moving along, we're kind of now moving into like swimwear, and this has still kind of got like that editorial swimwear look. It's not like overly sexy. It's not all about like booties and ass and everything, but it's, you know, another genre that I do enjoy shooting. And I feel like this image over here with the surfboard kind of keeps it in this sporty realm. And then maybe this image here in the middle, I always like this photo. I feel like it kind of has that surfer girl, you know, magazine editorial look that shows off the sexiness, but also shows like a strong female character. I really love this spread as well. And then as you can see here, unlike some of the other layouts that I've done, I put this tiny little white divider in. Maybe looking back, I should be a little bit more consistent on doing that with every page. But I thought in this specific example, just that little tiny divider kind of helped separate these images. And so as we move through, we're still staying on the sports theme. This was one of the very first F-Stoppers video I ever did, where I suspended a wakeboarder in the studio with rappelling gear, and then we threw water on him. And so I thought, you know, I have to include that image. And then I also used to love going out in Charleston and setting up strobe lights on the beach and trying to shoot kiteboarders at dusk with strobe lights, because it gives you this really dramatic looking sports portraiture that I really love doing this kind of stuff. So for this book, obviously I am trying to create a transition from editorial work to sports photography, and then here in a minute we're gonna get kind of into like fashion-y type of images. I'm trying to make that arc as easy to follow as possible. Now maybe you don't photograph this type of stuff. Let's say you are a commercial real estate or architectural photographer. You might want to start off with your book showing your best commercial real estate, and then from there maybe you move into residential real estate, and then from there you slowly transition maybe into food and bev. Maybe you're starting to shoot like restaurants and that sort of stuff. You wouldn't want to just mix it all together to where you have a super fancy commercial building, and then now you're in a cheaper real estate, and then now the next page you're back into fancy high-end real estate. Like, I think you want the viewer to be able to follow the path. And so with these last few pages, you know, I've kind of moved into swimwear and beach and watery, starting to see where this goes. Now we're in the studio and we're out on the water. And then if we go to the next one, now I've moved into like children portraits that I've done, surfing and you know, putting the camera underwater. And so I have this like water theme that's definitely kind of pulling the viewer in. And then now, as you might suspect, we go back to water. And maybe this layout could come a few pages early. I just didn't want it to be too much kiteboarding and wakeboarding back to back, but I felt like these images looked drastically different from these, especially in the tone. Like this all has the really contrasty black and white, muted colors, bright reds. And then these are very outdoorsy, summertime, you know, filtered effects on them. So I felt like this page was justified, but this page here kind of makes that transition and breaks the work up just a little bit. So now with the water work kind of done and the sports work kind of wrapping up, I pivot into the fashion work that I've done. And I don't know if this totally works, but my thought process was, what if I transition into some portraiture by the water and then pull the viewer into, you know, some other different directions. And so this image here on the left is an image that is very old. And so one thing I thought was really interesting in making this book was finding some of my older work that maybe I've forgotten about, revisiting it. And if I had raw files, I could re-edit the photos and kind of put a modern take on it. I would retouch them differently. Maybe I would, you know, tweak the white balance and the colors a little bit. I'd play with the crop a little bit. And so this image on the left is a very old image of mine, but then I've reimagined it the way that I might today. So with the same file, just kind of brought it into the style that I'm doing now. This image here I love. I think this was from a shoot where Lee and I did like the iPhone versus professional camera, where we both had to shoot the same model. And for me, this was kind of like that Vanity Fair hero shot of like a celebrity who's standing precariously on the mountainside. I really love this image. Now with the image on the right, this was another video that I did for F-Stoppers. And I would love for this spread to have another image on the left-hand side that kind of matched the vibe of this like Western, Westworld kind of strange, where like these two girls, they just give you this really uneasy vibe. Even though it's like a fashion image, it kind of makes you feel like something's off. Are these like Western frontiers who, you know, have guns and they're murderers and they're killers out on the run? Like, I don't know, this image just gives me some really interesting vibes, but I feel like the two images on the left don't really fit that. And so this was one layout that I found really difficult to try to build. So in some ways, this might be my least favorite spread of the entire book, but I do like all three of these images. Moving along, here's a personal project that I have started and unfortunately have not finished, and that is photographing amp builders. I'm a huge guitar freak, and I love music, and I love electronics and guitar pedals and guitar amps. And so I had this idea, you know, why don't I go out and visit some friends that I have out in LA, and while I'm out there, what if I send out a bunch of emails to some of the amp manufacturers and see if I can photograph these guys in front of their workstations. And so I have a bunch of these. I probably have 10 images that I need to get back to editing, and then I'd like to continue on this project. But these two photos I just feel like have so much character, and I just love the way they turned out. And so these two guys is kind of an interesting story. These two guys used to work with each other back when the company Matchless was started. This is Mark Sampson. He's kind of the engineer who developed the Matchless amps. And then this is Phil, who eventually bought the company out of bankruptcy and took it over. I don't know if these guys are even friends anymore. There's probably a huge history behind them. But if I had to pick two images from this series, these were the most exciting looking photographs. And with the layout, they also kind of face each other. And then the backstory that maybe no one else would know is that they actually played a part in history together. So I thought these images were really cool, and it kind of showcases, again, the editorial work that I had towards the beginning of the book, and just really dramatic looking photos. All right, here we've moved into some more editorial work. If you follow our channel, you may have seen the video where I did a shootout with Josh Rossi, and we had to go into a cave and take the best portrait. I wound up shooting our friend Robert, who is an incredible Puerto Rican tour guide, and so I said, let me take a portrait of him kind of leading his way through the cave. And then we were doing another series where it was 30 videos in 30 days. So every day we had to produce a video for our channel. And right at the beginning of that challenge, Charleston had the biggest snowstorm ever. And so I said, I have to go out and take some kind of photo. So a buddy of mine who lives down the street is a skier, and I said, hey, let's go out and take these images that will never be replicated again, because it never snows in Charleston. And so we did these kind of dramatic portraits in front of monuments in Charleston that are pretty iconic. And so one thing I want to talk about as I move through some of these images, some of these images, like here's Lee Morris right here. This was a series where he grew this crazy beard, and we shaved the beard slowly down, and he had different people take different photographs, and this was the photo that I produced of him looking like a redneck. But as you can see through these images here, these are just normal people, right? This is a buddy of mine, this is a tour guide, there's Lee, there's one of my neighbors in Puerto Rico. And then as we get into some of these other pages, we have more professional models. And so one thing that I think is really important that some photographers struggle with early on in their career is knowing what type of people to cast for certain photo shoots. And so I know in looking through a lot of images to make this book, I would find older shoots especially where, you know, I'd have this great concept, but then I would find some model off of like Model Mayhem. And while the photo shoot turned out great in terms of production and the vision that I had, when I go back, I realize the model isn't quite the type of person that should have been cast for that photo shoot. Or maybe you're taking portraits like this of Lee, and he's a friend of yours, but he looks like your friend, or he looks like, you know, he might be the photographer who's taking a self-portrait. So, you know, make sure you're casting people that are interesting in terms of the athletes. I mean, all of these people are actually, you know, doing these events, you know, like this is a real guy who plays basketball and is fit. You know, these are, you know, this girl's not a swimmer, but I cast somebody who looked like they would be a swimmer. I think it's just really important to make sure that there's nobody in your portfolio that looks out of place. You know, you don't want to cast somebody who's really out of shape to portray an athlete so that you can do a personal project to produce the image that you'll need to get hired by the company that does athletic wear. It's not going to make sense. They're going to say, that guy doesn't look like he's an athlete. Why did you cast him? So keep that in mind, not only when you're curating and trying to find the images to put in your portfolio, but more importantly, when you're setting out to make the images in the first place. The worst thing that you could do is put all this time and energy into producing a really cool personal project and then not having the right model. And models are also complicated because I remember having a conversation with my friend Joey Wright, and he was explaining how there are different types of professional models. There are models who are super sexy, and they're great for, you know, kind of that Instagram influencer realm. And then there's really tall, skinny models who might be great for runway. And then there's really attractive models who might be good for lifestyle. And then there's really fit models who would never be cast for runway they would look out of place, or they'd be too short, or they'd be too fit, but they're perfect for athletic wear. So even in the world of, professional models, there's certain people that you would want to hire for the particular shoot. So just kind of keep that in mind. In this case, Lee is the perfect model for being a redneck out in a trailer park. So here is one of the few shoots that I think I included in this book that was actually a commercial job of mine. I usually don't mix the commercial stuff with f-stoppers necessarily, but this I thought was an important shoot to put in this book because it showcases outdoor fashion or outdoor, this was like an e-commerce photo shoot. And so I had to take pictures of like 300 different outfits in November. It was right before Black Friday, and it was freezing cold, and I had to have all the lighting gear so that you could just produce images left and right like a conveyor belt. I mean, we had like 3 or 4 models, and they were just coming in with clothes, going out with clothes, standing, turning, taking a picture of the back, in and out. It's just a huge production, and so I wanted to make sure that this show album could appeal to smaller local brands, so that if I showed this to somebody here in Charleston, maybe they're not doing really high-end photo shoots, but they do need really professional looking catalog images like this. And so I thought this was a great example. The image on the right is the hero shot with all 3 of the models posed together, which is actually kind of a difficult image to capture. Getting 3 people to look their best in one single frame can be very daunting. Sometimes, I don't know, maybe I even removed one of their heads and retouched it in. And then on the left side is more of a single shot just to showcase the clothing. So we're kind of moving away from these like editorial images, and now I'm starting to slowly massage the book into like a advertising or fashion kind of direction. One thing also, I was talking about casting of models. Another thing that you want to make sure that you are very, very particular about is the retouching. I can't tell you how quickly a bad retouch job will completely compromise your entire presentation. If you have great models like this and the shoots look professional, but then you retouch or hire a retoucher and go too heavy-handed, nothing makes your work look more amateur than having bad retouching. And there's trends that I think photographers do in retouching that we think look good, but then there's trends that are actually being used in the commercial world. And one of those trends that's really popular is the unretouched retouch, where you try to make the images look natural and you've retouched them, but you leave some stray hairs and you leave a few little blemishes. Maybe you bring the blemishes down 15 or 20% instead of 100%. And so just be very aware that if you can retouch your images in a way that look like they're professionally done, great. If you can't do that, by all means, send your work, especially the work that you're going to publish for your own portfolio, send that off to a professional retoucher and just pay the extra money to have your images retouched so they're at the same caliber as everybody else's work. Do not fall victim to bad retouching. And that even goes with composite work. Like this image with Lee, this is composited against a backplate. Make sure that there's no halos and that there's no weird lines and inconsistencies in your composite work. Now this next layout is kind of the black sheep of all of the layouts, and I think I was inspired by a photographer, I'm going to butcher his name, Patrick D. Marchelier. He's the guy who took that iconic, Janet Jackson Rolling Stone cover where she's standing and the hands are over her breast. He's an incredible photographer, and over in our library I have a bunch of his books, and 1 or 2 of his books that he's published are just negatives. They're just contact sheets of all of the images. And I thought that was really cool. And I had this random shoot that I did with a friend. It's kind of like the fashion-y thing. And I had all these like good outtakes. And so I just thought, what if I designed something that just looked very different, that showcased maybe kind of like the outtakes of a photo shoot and then featured one image that kind of stood out. And so I designed this in Photoshop. It does stand out in the sense that none of these other pages look anything like this, but I thought it was just kind of interesting, and it was just a way to kind of break up the book and add a little pizzazz. If you go this route, maybe you want to make all of your pages have this kind of element. This is also the only image that has a white border around it, but I just thought this was kind of a cool way to present. It's kind of like a test shoot. If a modeling agency wanted me to work with a few of their models and take a bunch of pictures, this kind of represents, just doing a test shoot with a bunch of carefree images that are just fun and relaxing, and it's also leading into the fashion-y type of portraiture. This page, I don't know. I would like your guys' opinion on this. I have put 4 very impactful portraits all on one page. And maybe looking at it, maybe it's too much. But my thought was, what if I could showcase the different types of lighting that I can do, and you could see it all side by side. So the one on the left is kind of like a low-key beauty light. The one just next to it is a high-key beauty light. And then the one on the right is just a different kind of strip box lighting that is, you know, kind of a glamoury type of lighting. And then the far right one, you know, has some gobos and some shadows. And so my thought was, this page just kind of shows that I could light the face in a different way. Or maybe if I'm meeting with a client that I know I'm gonna have to take images like this for them, and they don't know how to articulate the lighting that they like, I could have 4 different examples and just show it to them. And again, my thought is, with a presentation like this, maybe no other photographer is able to articulate the lighting in such a straightforward way. And so maybe this would give value to my work. But this is kind of like the beauty headshot type of layout here. Now we move into some more Puerto Rico work. You know, a lot of these girls are like Miss World or Miss Earth or Miss Puerto Rico. And so I don't really do a lot of pageantry type stuff, but this kind of just, I don't know, just represents some of the more current shoots that I've done in the last year. They all have the same gray tones. And then this is probably the most fashion spread that I have. Just every now and then I have to shoot some catalog stuff, or somebody wants something on a seamless. And I also really like doing gelled and long exposure shoots. So I wanted to put all those in together and kind of make it cohesive. Hopefully this was a good attempt at this, but just like the previous layout that's got the 4 people, this also has a lot of imagery to take in. And so maybe if you have the pages to spare, you would center these and leave each image on its own page. I don't know. You guys tell me if you think this is a good idea or not. But to break it up a little bit, I wound up using 2 images that have kind of gels and some more funky lighting. And then we have like a very old image that I took that I've reimagined and re-edited, because I feel like the styling on this does look good enough to kind of have it feel like a real ad. And then this image here in the middle, I meant to shoot an F-Stoppers video for it, but the video itself just didn't turn out really good. So you guys will never see this one. But this is an interesting long exposure where I used a little Profoto flash, but then I did a really long exposure with a neutral density filter, and I was able to get her dress to have this really cool blurred effect. And it just kind of reminds me of like a perfume ad or something. I see this type of imagery every time I go into the duty-free store. So I thought this was a good representation of the type of fashion work that I do. I'm definitely not a fashion photographer, so this isn't the type of stuff I really go after, but I thought maybe as I'm transitioning, it made sense. Now, while we're here, one thing I do want to bring up that you might want to consider, especially if you are a more established photographer, is utilizing tear sheets. I've heard people ask this question a lot. Should you feature actual prints that have been retouched and with text, and they're tear sheets that you could like pull out of the magazine? Should you have scans of those and put them in your show album? I think it is a good idea. I think, you know, it might bring you out of the flow a little bit if every image is jumping back and forth between an image that's come straight out of your camera that you've retouched, and then next to it is a tear sheet. Maybe there's a way to, you know, at the very end of your book, just put a bunch of tear sheets. The thing that the tear sheet does that I think is important in selling yourself is it showcases your professionalism, and it showcases that you have already done that type of work that's been featured by brands or publications that the person in front of you looking at your book might recognize. So I didn't feature any tear sheets in this book itself. Again, these are all images that I've pretty much taken as personal projects for F-Stoppers. And so none of the tear sheets, you know, these images would never be featured in tear sheets. But if you have really good published work, you may want to find ways to integrate that into a book like this. Now, moving from the fashion page, now I take a very hard turn, and this is another page that looks very unlike anything else in my book. So Saal-Digital's software allows you to build these really complex layouts that look super professional, and I am a horrible graphic designer, so trying to build this on my own would take forever. But luckily, Sal they have these templates where you just literally click a button and it will just put this in, and then if you don't like it, you click the button again and it reimagines it and places the images in different locations. This page is probably the most successful photo shoot I've ever done. This was a personal project. I named it the Taser Photo Shoot, and then Taser reached out to me and said, it wasn't a taser, don't you dare use our trademark name. So I've changed it to the Stun Gun Photo Shoot. And basically I took a stun gun to people, photographed them in the middle of their reaction, and it went super viral. It got me on CNN. And so this page, in like hundreds of different publications as well, I think this photo shoot cost me $1,000 to produce, and I think I made over $10,000 in licensing, and wound up with a really cool photo series. So this is a personal project that I wanted to feature a ton of different images so that when somebody looked at it, they could really take their time and look through the images. And something like this, I feel like it needs 20 images to really tell the story. And so this layout for me made the most sense. And then I did a screen capture of a second of the special that they did on CNN. And I have their logo and everything on there. So it just shows that my work has been published on TV, and this is probably one of the crazier shoots I've ever done. Now, here are the last 2 pages of this book. I know this is getting kind of long, and perhaps maybe I should have just stopped here, but I wanted to feature some landscapes only because I like these images. And it shows that, I do other things than photograph people. And at this point, I feel like all my bangers have been in there. I've just left you with 2 huge viral photo series. I think by this time I'm talking with my client, or I'm giving my client a laugh. And then now in my mind, let's just settle down and just kind of showcase that, I've traveled a little bit and I have some beautiful landscape photos here. One thing that's tricky with landscapes is if you have this larger book, you can see the formatting here. It's really rare that I would have an image that would be in this like 32 by 12 ratio. So you are gonna have to span the gutter and figure out some clever ways to do a layout here. As you can see, I've made my white border a little bit thicker right here to kind of separate this out. I've been really fortunate to travel to like 30 different countries over my photographic lifetime. And so I just wanted to show some really wild places in the event that, I could connect with somebody who's been to Patagonia. Maybe they've been to Argentina, and I could all of a sudden now connect with them on a different level. So a lot of times, I go back to that third point of making your presentation an emotional experience. With wedding photography, a lot of times I'm trying to get people to talk, and I'm trying to show them interesting locations and maybe the location that they're getting married at. And then suddenly now I can bond with them in a way that separates me from another potential person that they might be hiring. This is kind of falling in that category as well. And then I end on a high note with 4 of my favorite landscape shots of New York City, all taken from a helicopter. And it's just another one of those things where I think a lot of photographers may have done drone photography, but not everybody has hung outside the side of a helicopter with the doors off and taken landscape shots. So to be able to show this in a town that kind of prohibits most drones, I think that these are really high end, they look really good. And it's just kind of a cool way to wrap up the book. And so that is my show album. I'm really excited about it. As you can see, it's not perfect. There are some things that I'm still on the fence about, whether or not I made the right decision. I'd be curious to hear what you guys think. If there's any layout that you think looks bad, if there's any image that you think I should have gotten rid of, or maybe if my overall theme of going from editorial portraits into sports, into kind of fashion, into personal projects, and then ending on some landscapes. I think that thread makes sense, and I don't think that I'm showcasing all of these images that are in wildly different genres. I think they all do kind of fit in the profile that I am as a photographer. But hope you guys enjoyed this. If you want to make your own album like this, head over to the link in the description below. There are some current deals that we have running for F-Stoppers readers if you want to save a little bit of money. Also, check out Monty Isom's Making Real Money. He goes through all of the psychology of marketing and how to get this type of stuff in front of the right people, because not only do you have to produce this book, but now I need to have the contacts to send this book to the right people, and that is even harder than producing the work itself. So if you're interested in getting into commercial photography and learning about licensing and copyright, doing big budgets and productions, and you feel so overwhelmed with all these questions on how much your day rate should be and how much should your licensing be, or you have to come up with a proposal and you need to outline every single line item and you're like, I have no idea how much money to put on for catering and how much should my digital tech cost? I don't even use digital tech. If you have questions about any of that stuff, definitely check out Monty's tutorial because, I mean, it is so mind-blowing on how much money that you can make in that field, but it's also the best secrets that he's learned over his entire career, and we're fortunate enough to have him sharing that kind of information. So there you go, 2023, my brand new show album. I am really proud of this. I think it's great having all this work in one place, and I love this presentation. You know, this is something that I can put out on my coffee table or put on my bookshelf, and it feels substantial, and I'm excited for people to come over and look at it. I'm also excited to start showing people that I might be working with this album, and of course, the ultimate goal is to put this in a mailer, mail it off, and start having some larger clients look at my work. If you guys enjoyed this kind of content, make sure you subscribe to our channel below. Our goal for last year was to hit 1 million subscribers, and we actually fell short of that. Make sure you subscribe to our channel below and hit the bell so that you are notified when we have new videos. Also, check out fstoppers.com if you enjoy reading articles about photography. And if you want to learn from some of the best photographers in the world in a ton of different genres of photography, head over to fstoppers.com/store where you can check out our full-length tutorials. These cover everything from fashion photography to architectural photography, headshots, landscapes, portraiture. And if you don't know what type of genre you really want to specialize in, we have one called The Well-Rounded Photographer, which features 10 different photographers all in one tutorial. It's absolutely a great place to start if you're looking at specializing, but you aren't quite sure which genre might be the one for you. Definitely check that out, and I will see you guys very, very soon.